Why does it keep happening? Maybe you asked yourself that today. Why me? Why now? Why does it feel like it never lets up? You've done the work. You've believed, surrendered, prayed, persisted. But still, life keeps unraveling, thread by thread, right in front of you. And what used to feel like guidance from above has gone quiet. You're not alone in wondering if the universe is pushing you too far. When everything begins to fall away, when the breaking becomes relentless, you don't feel awakened. You feel emptied. It's not the kind of pain that shocks anymore. It's the kind that drains, that wears your soul thin, that makes faith feel fragile and the idea of divine timing seem like a cruel joke. And yet, you're still here, still searching, not because it's easy, but because pretending no longer works. And maybe, just maybe, this raw, vulnerable, hollow place isn't your undoing. It's your becoming. Because there's something the world misses about you, but the universe doesn't. This pain, however senseless it seems, is not a mistake. It's not random. It's not punishment. It's preparation. The beginning of a deeper transformation that can't be built on illusion, only truth. Pain never comes with explanation. It enters like a shadow, uninvited, disorienting, sharp. No announcement, no mercy, just presence. What once felt stable begins to blur. What once brought you peace now disappears, slipping from your grasp like smoke. And yet, beneath the chaos, beneath the ache that makes no sense, there is something far more precise than it appears. Pain has a pattern, but it's one you cannot see with the eyes, only with the soul. Because the universe wastes nothing. Not your wounds, not your delays, not the nights you cried without understanding. Even the ache is carrying meaning, though it may take time to unfold. The world teaches us to avoid suffering at all costs, to seek ease, speed, shortcuts, pleasure, but the deeper laws of existence, they don't run on comfort. They run on becoming. They run on refinement. In the eyes of the universe, pain is not punishment. It's preparation. Not a blade that wounds, but a fire that burns away the excess, what no longer belongs. Those who are called to walk with deeper wisdom must first be emptied of surface things. Before a soul can become a sanctuary, it must be stripped of its scaffolding, of ego, of illusion, of expectation. The hand behind your breaking is not careless. It's skillful. It knows exactly where to press, where to shake, what to remove so that what is eternal can remain. Transformation doesn't happen in sunlight. It begins in soil. It begins in dark corners where no one is watching. The caterpillar dissolves before the butterfly is born. Becoming looks a lot like breaking. So if all you see is rubble, if all you feel is collapse, you are not failing. You are in process. Something ancient is taking root. Something sacred is forming beneath the surface where no one can see. Yet, you are not being reduced, you are being realigned. The old structures must fall, not because you did something wrong, but because the next version of you requires stronger foundations. False identities, shallow beliefs, and stories that once kept you safe but small, they cannot come with you where you're going. So the universe lets them fall, and though it hurts, though it feels like loss, what's rising in their place is more honest, more whole, more aligned with who you truly are becoming. You have not been thrown away. You have been planted, not in the soil you chose, not in the season you asked for, but deep beneath the surface where light doesn't reach and where the world cannot see. You are being rooted. It may feel like silence, like abandonment, but the truth is your soul is growing in a language only the universe understands. No one sees it yet, no applause greets it, but every tear is watering something sacred. Every ache is loosening the fall so the true can rise. Your heartbreak is not wasted, it is compost for wisdom. The silence you dread is teaching you to hear differently, to listen beyond noise, beyond logic, beyond the need for clarity. And slowly, gently, almost without you realizing, your soul begins to rebuild. Not around what you've lost, but around what you're becoming. The ache is not just a wound, it is an architect. In suffering stillness, the ego finally quiets. And beneath the rubble of what fell apart, you begin to hear the voice of what cannot be shaken. Something older than your circumstances. Something eternal. The universe never moves in haste. It is not molding you for comfort. It is carving you for depth. Not fleeting success, but lasting substance. So it chisels patiently, stripping away what cannot follow you forward. Shallow dreams, false roles, the noise of who you were told to be. Every hollowing is making space. Every breaking is clearing ground. What looks like loss may be sacred protection. What you named as failure could be the foundation of everything to come. Because brokenness in the hands of the divine is never destruction. It is revelation. Not the kind you read, but the kind you feel. The kind that shatters illusion and builds truth in its place. When your life is torn wide open, what remains is what's real. And it is there, in the moments when nothing is left, when your hands are empty, that something extraordinary begins to take shape. Clarity, rootedness, true purpose. This breaking is not burying you, it is birthing you. The hand that allowed the fire is the same one preparing your rising. And that fire, it speaks in a voice all its own. Once the familiar is stripped away, once your false self dissolves, a different voice enters. It doesn't speak with comfort. It doesn't whisper reassurance. It speaks in silence, in intensity, in transformation. The furnace becomes the teacher. Pain becomes the vocabulary. You stop praying to escape and begin groaning from the core of your being, not for relief, but for revelation. Fire doesn't ask permission. It just burns. And in the burning, it reveals. What is false cannot survive the flame. Ego-driven goals, unaligned plans, identity built on external validation. They all melt. And what's left, and is what cannot be taken from you. Faith that doesn't hinge on proof. Love that isn't tied to outcome. Purpose that doesn't waver when tested. In the forge of fire, your character is not just tested, it's redefined. You start to know the difference between what looked beautiful and what carries eternal weight. There are truths you cannot learn in peace. Only scar tissue can carry them. Not because they are too complex, but because they must be felt to be known. Words spoken from comfort ring hollow, but words spoken from the flame, they don't echo, they pierce. The soul that has burned doesn't speak to be heard. It speaks to be understood. And from that understanding, a new kind of authority is born, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that draws it in quiet reverence. You speak softly, because your voice now carries weight. This is not the end, this is the beginning of your voice, the beginning of true power, the beginning of your sacred roots. You do not emerge from the fire untouched. You emerge refined, rare, resilient. You no longer fear the silence of the universe. You understand it. Because now, you know, silence is not absence, it's intimacy. You have become fluent in the language of fire, and in doing so, you've become fluent in a strength the world cannot teach, a strength only suffering can birth. When you emerge from the fire, something within you is forever changed. It's not just the world that looks different. You carry yourself differently. There's no longer a need to be seen, no urgency to prove your worth, no hunger to explain your pain. You begin to carry something quieter, but infinitely more powerful. Evidence, not of perfection, but of endurance, of evolution. Where the world celebrates the flawless, the universe appoints the scarred. Not the ones who hide their pain beneath polished smiles, but the ones who wear their wounds as sacred symbols. Proof that they've been through the breaking and emerged with deeper wisdom, not bitterness. Scars speak when words fall silent. They say, I've walked through fire and I still stand. I know what it means to break and still rise. In a world obsessed with image, authenticity becomes magnetic. Those who've suffered deeply and chosen to heal, they don't shine to be admired. They shine because they've become light itself. There's a stillness in them that draws people near, a quiet strength that speaks louder than any sermon, not by performance, but by presence. Their light doesn't blind, it guides. It doesn't preach, it invites. It doesn't seek applause, it offers truth. And those still lost in chaos, they feel it. They recognize something in that presence, not a doctrine, not a theory, but a lived reality. Because pain, when transformed, becomes power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that steadies. A soul that has been shattered and carefully stitched back together no longer fears its imperfections. It embraces them, speaks from them, lives through them. These are not preachers, they are proof. Every step after the breaking becomes a quiet sermon, one that doesn't ask for attention. It simply walks with intention, because the universe does not commission the untouched. It calls the wounded, the scarred, the ones who walk slower now but carry sacred things in their silence. Healing does not erase the past, it reassigns it. The betrayal, the loss, the collapse, they don't disappear. They become part of the offering. They become the altar upon which grace is revealed. There's a strange beauty in how the most fractured vessels often shine the brightest, because light slips through cracked walls far more easily than polished glass. And through those cracks, others begin to see their own reflection, their own possibility of rising again. Your pain personalizes your power. You don't speak in theory, you speak in testimony. Not to elevate yourself, but to remind someone else you can survive this too. The universe is not impressed by polished resumes. It exalts surrendered hearts. And a surrendered heart is one that has collapsed under its own weight and still breathes. And that breath, that survival, becomes a quiet authority. Not the kind that commands attention from a platform, but the kind that leans in and whispers directly into someone's darkest night. I've been where you are, and there's light on the other side. When true healing touches you, your life ceases to belong to only you. It becomes a reflection for others, a compass for the Wuklunis, a quiet light for those still walking through the night. And it is not despite your scars, but because of them. When your wounds no longer speak of shame, but begin to shine as vessels of wisdom, a sacred shift begins. You surrender. Not out of exhaustion, not because you've given up, but because you've finally seen the truth. Clenching does not save you, it only cages you. In pain, that merciless teacher has shown you control was only ever an illusion. You stop trying to bend the universe to your will, and you begin to bend with it. That's when surrender transforms from weakness into power. Letting go no longer means defeat, it means alignment. It means trusting the same hidden hand that allowed your breaking to now guide your becoming. True surrender isn't passive. It is the boldest act of faith. It takes more strength to release than to resist. And when you finally do, space opens. Space where pride once sat, where fear once whispered, where ego once clung. That space becomes sacred ground, a quiet chamber where unseen power begins to stir. Not the kind that demands, but the kind that flows. Steady, subtle, sure. And you start to understand. Divine strength doesn't roar. It doesn't dominate. It moves through stillness. It moves through positioning, not performance. And the posture of that positioning is low, not in value, but in humility. Surrender whispers, I release the version of me I've tried so hard to become, so I can step into who I was always meant to be. In this stillness, the burdens begin to lift. The noise softens. Clarity returns. You no longer run to be seen, to be right, to be recognized. You simply become present. And in that presence, doors begin to open. Not always around you, but within you. And here's the paradox. In losing the fight to control life, you gain access to the life that was always yours. Not a life free from pain, but a life finally aligned. Your past no longer disqualifies you. It becomes the foundation. What once seemed to break you now becomes what qualifies you to carry depth, compassion, and sacred insight. You finally understand, surrender was never about losing who you are. It was always about revealing it. Beneath all the striving, beneath all the ambition, was someone already formed. Not for applause, but for purpose. And so, you move differently now, not with urgency, but with grace. Decisions aren't forced, they're felt. Direction doesn't come from pressure, but from peace. This is how the unseen power of the universe flows. Quiet, slow, undeniable. And as you walk in that surrendered strength, the weight you once carried transforms into the presence you now embody. You're no longer trying to shine. You simply are light, not through effort, not through striving, but through yielding, by letting go. After the breaking, something new begins to stir within you. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly. Soft as dawn, steady as breath. The pain that once threatened to consume you becomes the soil. Dark, fertile, and honest, where strength quietly begins to take root. Not everything returns to how it once was, and it's not meant to. Some pieces remain altered, some never return at all, but even the cracks, especially the cracks, catch the light now in a way they never could before. Your old life doesn't rebuild itself into the same shape. It forms something new, something wiser, less polished, but more whole. Less ideal, but more real. What once felt like ruin begins to whisper of design. The universe is not in the business of rewinding time. It redeems not by returning you to what was, but by transforming you into something deeper than what you imagine. Scars that once felt like shame become sacred scripts, etched into your skin by survival, written in the ink of resilience. They don't speak of defeat. They testify that something tried to destroy you and failed. Your suffering becomes the language of compassion. When people encounter you now, they don't just meet a person, they meet a presence. A soul that's been tempered by fire yet remains soft enough to hold someone else through the heat. There is a strength born only in ruins, a quiet authority that doesn't demand, but radiates. You begin to see life in layers. What used to trigger anger now humbles you. What once terrified you now grounds you. You don't live in pain anymore. You live through it. It becomes a memory, not a prison, a reference point, not a residence. And through it all, your values shift. Joy becomes simpler. Peace becomes a treasure. And faith, true hard-won faith, is no longer something you talk about. It's something you carry. You no longer chase certainty. You walk in trust. You're no longer trying to control everything. You're listening and responding. This transformation doesn't arrive with trumpets. It moves in quiet ripples. You begin to notice you're not reacting from fear. You're responding from wisdom. Where once you demanded answers, now you offer understanding. Where once you needed to be heard, now your presence speaks louder than words. People begin to listen, not because your voice is loud, but because your life whispers something eternal. You're standing taller now, not because you're unbroken, but because you've learned how to walk with the pieces. You are no longer a prisoner of your past. You are a carrier of its power. The ruins didn't disappear. They've been rearranged into something purposeful, something beautiful, something sacred. The universe didn't erase your history, it repurposed it. And now every step you take forward is a quiet act of defiance, a sacred declaration. The breaking didn't end me, it equipped me. And slowly the story of your survival starts to stretch beyond just your own healing. You become a lighthouse, not because you tried to be seen, but because you walked through fire and chose to stay lit. People are no longer drawn to the mask you used to wear. They're drawn to your presence, not because it's loud, but because it's true. There's a gravity in you now, a quiet pull that doesn't beg to be noticed, but cannot be ignored. You don't speak as one who studied the storm. You speak as one who stood in its center, wept in its winds, and survived its science. The light you now carry was not handed to you. It was forged. In midnight moments, in the loneliness of unraveling, in the raw ache of becoming. And because of where it came from, that light holds a depth no spotlight could ever recreate. There is a sacred weight to a voice that has walked through pain. It doesn't lecture. It doesn't perform. It holds space. It offers empathy without pity, truth without superiority. When people look at you, they don't see someone who avoided falling. They see someone who learned how to rise. And in that, they see their own possibility. Not everyone will understand what you carry. Not everyone is meant to. But the ones who are still lost in the dark, they will recognize you. They will feel your presence and hear your story as the whisper their own soul has been waiting for. Your scars speak the language that silent wounds understand. You don't need to be perfect to be a beacon. You only need to stay lit, even when the wind tries to put you out. You've stopped hiding your process to look put to around because you've learned the cracks in your foundation are no longer weaknesses. They are windows. They are how the light escapes. You don't need a stage, you are the message. Your presence is the permission someone else needs to begin again. Without striving, you've become an invitation, a living reminder that healing is possible, that hope is still alive, that pain is not the final word. Where others bury their past in shame, you carry yours like a lantern. Not to glorify the fall, but to light the path for someone still walking through the night. What nearly destroyed you has now become a map. And here's the most beautiful truth of all. You're not guiding people to you. You're guiding them to the same presence that walked you through the fire. You are not the destination. You are the evidence that the path exists. Pain, when seen through the eyes of eternity, ceases to be meaningless. It becomes the very path through which we are refined, humbled, and commissioned. The universe never breaks you to destroy you. It breaks you to build you into something deeper, truer, unshakable. So if today you are hurting, if you're doubting your worth, questioning your path, or lost in the shadows of your own becoming, remember this: the darkness you walk through now may be the very place your roots are quietly taking hold. And when you rise, because you will rise, you will know in your bones, the pain was never the end. It was the beginning, the doorway, the sacred threshold of everything you were always meant to become. If this message touched something deep within you, if it reminded you of your own silent strength, your unseen growth, your sacred becoming, then let it be more than just words. Let it be a mirror, a pause, a moment of remembering who you truly are. And if you're walking this journey, not toward perfection, but toward presence, toward depth, toward light, you're not alone. Here, we walk it together. So if you feel called to stay, to keep listening, to keep rising, subscribe. Not for content, but for connection, not for noise, but for nourishment. This space is for you, for your healing, for your fire, for your becoming. And remember, you were never too broken. You were always being prepared to shine from the cracks the world once told you to hide. We'll see you in the next whisper. Why does it keep happening? Maybe you asked yourself that today. Why me? Why now? Why does it feel like it never lets up? You've done the work. You've believed, surrendered, prayed, persisted. But still, life keeps unraveling, thread by thread, right in front of you. And what used to feel like guidance from above has gone quiet. You're not alone in wondering if the universe is pushing you too far. When everything begins to fall away, when the breaking becomes relentless, you don't feel awakened. You feel emptied. It's not the kind of pain that shocks anymore. It's the kind that drains, that wears your soul thin, that makes faith feel fragile and the idea of divine timing seem like a cruel joke. And yet, you're still here, still searching, not because it's easy, but because pretending no longer works. And maybe, just maybe, this raw, vulnerable, hollow place isn't your undoing. It's your becoming. Because there's something the world misses about you, but the universe doesn't. This pain, however senseless it seems, is not a mistake. It's not random. It's not punishment. It's preparation. The beginning of a deeper transformation that can't be built on illusion, only truth.